My name is Katie Parrish, Editorial Director of MCM Group, and your host for today's conference. If you have follow-up questions, comments, ideas, or suggestions after today's event, please feel free to contact me at the phone number or email address on the screen. MCM Group would like to extend a special thank you to today's sponsor for today's presentation, Serious Labs, Inc. Serious Labs develops advanced simulator and game-based training systems for high-stakes jobs in the global construction, mining, and oil and gas industries. The company combines instructional design, game mechanics, simulation technologies to challenge trainees through a series of realistic training missions that demand real-time consequence-based decisions. Research demonstrates this type of game-based training accelerates skill development and significantly improves retention. Learn more about Serious Labs at seriouslabs.com. When safety was first introduced in 2007, our mission was to bring lifting equipment users and operators presentations and information to raise safety awareness, introduce best practices, and bring compliance awareness to the construction, rental, and industrial markets. Topics are selected to help provide clarification, unify industry efforts, and help save the lives of equipment operators and workers on the ground. Today's presentation is brought to you by Gerald Thompson of ICOM Productions. We'll discuss how to use technology to organize business initiatives into tools to help workers learn as they feel, see, and do. If you have questions for Gerald during the presentation, please type them into the question box on your screen right here. We'll answer all questions at the end of the presentation. Additionally, this is being recorded and can be accessed this week on safetyconference.com and the MCM Group YouTube channel. Addresses for both will be shown at the end of the presentation. Note that there will be some videos during the presentation. If you have trouble seeing them, don't worry, as Gerald will pause the screen during the most significant portions of the videos to discuss them. I'm going to pass the controls over to Gerald, and he's going to take it from here. You sure you all set?
Yep. Let's see, monitor 2, clean. Okay, is that coming through okay on your side?
Yes, it is.
Oh, excellent. Great. Well, thanks for having me here. Everyone, I'm glad to have your time. I will move relatively quickly through this presentation, and I do know that you're going to be gathering questions, and I'll do my best to try to make it clear throughout. It's definitely difficult on a webinar to not respond to feedback immediately, but I'll hopefully try not to be too confusing so that when we get to the end here, if you have any specific questions, we can address those. I'll first start off by zooming over here. This is what Serious Labs does, so some quick images of some equipment. Mainly here we're looking at forklift variations. What Serious Labs is going to focus on, though, in addition to what you see here, is they're going to be using these elements in gaming environments. So this is where you are immersively putting someone into a situation and helping them to make decisions or control equipment or see how it's actually used and to try it out in a place where they can make mistakes or they can be challenged before you put them into the real environment. So it's a safe place to make mistakes, and it's also not taking equipment out of service or creating any hazards. And we do know that there is a correlation between performance in a simulation and performance in the field, and that's what they do best. So where does ICOM Productions come in? So if I'm being asked to be here by Serious Labs and there's this other company in ICOM Productions, well, what are we? What we do is more focus on the tracking of training and the direct instruction components of training in a media environment. So I will say we're a learning company first and foremost, so we're focused on corporate learning, not just in mining and oil and gas and construction and heavy equipment, although that's a big part of what we do. We do focus on the learning components, so focusing on what people can know, do, and feel. If we're brought an audience that needs some change to occur in what they know, do, and feel to help them do their jobs, that's what we're going to focus on. Now, it may involve a certain amount of gaming or interactivity in the media pieces that we make, but we're not necessarily doing everything in the gaming world. That's what Serious Labs does. What we're doing is we're trying to track the performance of that training in learning management systems, and we're also trying to build media packages, whether they're for use in the classroom or online, to help people even get ready for the simulator. Because certainly you can't just throw somebody into a simulation or a game and have them become experts. That may not be an efficient use of the sim. So what we're trying to do is prepare students and ramp them up with the basics of what the controls are and what the challenges are going to be with the job or the general safety rules, and get some basic proficiency so that then they're ready to move on into the simulation and start making decisions, which then of course prepares them for the field work. So we are a learning company. We look like a media shop because about, I don't know, 70 or 80 of our 105 people are either graphic artists, animators, illustrators, those types of individuals, or technologists, so people who are helping with the coding in the back end to make things function properly. So we look like a media shop. And we do what we say is e-learning, and e-learning as a term is used pretty broadly. It's used to talk about live classrooms like this, like the webinar. It's also used for remote classroom work. What we're talking about in e-learning for ICOM is these functional media pieces, and that's what we're seeing here. You know, we've gone through a lot of growth. As you guys know, there's probably been more growth in this world in corporate training than anything in the last decade. And yeah, in about 1996, we were about 4 guys making all sorts of media pieces, whether it was advertisements or websites or commercials or you name it. We were probably doing something in that space. And our new owner around that time said, well, let's focus on what we're good at, because all these media companies are tanking and crashing. There was one piece that we had worked on at that time that triggered that new owner into realizing, wow, this subset of media is where we need to go. And so what we're looking at here is the first piece of learning that ICOM did back around 1996. So once again, I'll play this video. If it's a little choppy, I'll pause it, and you'll get a chance to see a little bit about what we're talking. Here right now is an image of a spinning tank, and there's a narrator. I'll pause it here. There's a narrator talking about all the details that are on the left here. And the intent of this training was for members of the Canadian military to do friend and foe identification. So if we gave them all this technical information and showed a picture of a spinning tank, then we could get them to do friend and foe identification in the field, or at least that was the hope. And when we look at this, we realize, wow, that's really pretty good 3D. And so we're proud of the fact that it's pretty good 3D for 1996, but we're still going to call it the worst e-learning we ever did. And why is that? Well, partly because the narrator is just reading data, and in the end, I have no idea if my students are able to identify friend versus foe in the field. So that's not a good thing to do if that was the intent of this program. So the real question is, did they learn or did they change? And I'd say, well, probably they kind of went through a change because they watched this thing. And I can guess that when I look at this audience that they are soldiers, and they probably are pretty motivated to identify a good tank from a bad tank. So there's really no issue there. So they might have sat down and played this media again and again and again to learn what the different tanks look like, but we sure didn't make it easy for them. And so we would say mistakes were made. We probably put in too much technical information. We made the assumption that if the information's in there, they will learn it. So if we list this data, we list this policy, we list this information, we can expect people to learn it. And we would totally disagree with that now. And in the end, what do? The students were never challenged in this to actually identify friend versus foe. So we missed lots of opportunities there. And if we could go back and change it, we would focus on a methodology for learning, not for media. So we're not just looking at pretty spinning tanks and lots of data on the screen. We're looking at how is it that we change what people know, do, and feel in the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor departments. And this is, within Bloom's methodology, and there's lots of other methodologies in education to consider. But we're saying, wow, what could we really do to change people in these domains? And there's lots that we could do. So I would break it down in this one course to say, well, we probably could have simplified things visually. If you've got this detailed tank, why don't we take the time to do silhouettes of it, or highlight where is the turret, or what's the size of the turret relative to the tracks, or what's the length of the barrel? Where are the antennas on this? What's the angles of the tracks? So if I can identify 3, 4, 5, or 6 different categories of differences of different parts of tanks, and to lump those together, we could probably make it a lot easier for the individuals, as opposed to just showing them spinning tanks. We're also going to look at the value side, so that affective piece, that, working with individuals' emotional response. We're probably going to be playing around in the domain of certain shapes and certain visual elements are attached to a negative feeling, and certain shapes are attached to a positive feeling, so that we start playing in that sort of domain of feeling and values. So we definitely want to do that, and we can do that certainly in safety courses as well. When we're looking at the last one here, get them identifying tanks, that's the do. We've got to give them opportunities to see tanks in different situations, probably starting with simplified silhouettes and getting them distinguishing one from another, and getting into more and more and more detailed, very difficult to see or obscured photographs, so that they can now see what they would in the field and still be able to identify if that's a good guy or a bad guy. So that's all good in theory, but we didn't do it. And in the end, what we're trying to do is apply these methodologies to everything we do. Now, I know that in Bloom's methodology we see know it, feel it, and do it, so cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. But you know what? The know component of what we do in media is relatively straightforward. In fact, it's abused to the point where if we just list all those details that they're supposed to know and have an expensive narrator state them, we're going to assume they're going to learn it. And that's just not true. So really what we're going to focus on more than anything is getting students to see things differently. We're going to get them to feel things differently. And we're going to get them to actually do it within these media tools. And as a general rule, regardless of your topic, if you can focus on these things, that's where you're going to find success. So what I'm going to do is some rapid-fire examples within these different categories. I'll skip some of them. I'll try to move quickly because I know we're trying to get done here in another 20 minutes or so that we can get lots of questions taken care of. So in this see it category, the first thing that we're going to play around with is this idea that we learn pretty effortlessly in a spatial environment. Think about a time that maybe even 10 years ago you walked into somebody's house for the first time and you haven't been back there since. You were there for a dinner party. But you still remember walking in the front door and knowing that the living room was on the left and the kitchen was on the right and the walls were pink and there was a glass tabletop coffee table and there was wood paneling. There's certain things that in that physical space you learned instantaneously without effort. And today you still remember the basic layout of that room or that space. And we think that's a phenomenal thing. And it's something that we're going to leverage. So how do we leverage it? So for example, what I'll show you next here is this is actually the starting page of a learning management system. So this is where a student that works at Mark's Work Warehouse, which is a work-based clothing retailer across Canada. This is where all of their employees that are working on the floor of the stores go to get their basic training. Now, the first thing they're going to see is just a big, intro button and a mouse picture that says, you better click here. So if they can't figure that out, there'll eventually be another arrow that comes down and says, hey, you'd better click on this to get your training started. Where the magic occurs is that there are 60 or 70 different training elements, both e-learning, you'll see some classroom training, you'll see some field training in here. And what we're going to do is once they complete this first bit of training, we're going to peel off the roof and show them the interior of a store. And these are all the different departments. So as they click on these different elements, they're going to be able to expose different training that's available to them. So they've got some e-learning curriculum here and some WMIS curriculum here. They can see that they've completed or not completed certain elements. And what we're going to hopefully do is anchor that learning that's occurred to this spatial environment. so that later on, once they complete these things, they might go, oh yeah, there was this thing about greeting and being friendly. And where did that occur? Oh, it occurred right at the beginning of this exercise, right at the entry of the store. So we're anchoring learning to a physical space. And these are all different learning elements, once again, but we're using this spatial environment to allow students to go back and learn more or to reference what they've already learned. So these spatial pieces become very important to us. That's one way that you can play around with that seeing domain. Another thing that we'll play around with just has to do with organizing content and information about your company in a spatial environment within a course. So this is not a learning management system. This piece that you're seeing now is actually some course components, some course elements. And this is a company called Gibson's. They do mainly transportation of petroleum products. And now we want them to learn about their business units. So the students within this course, and I'll pause it here, this is effectively a menu, and we're now asking the students to click on each piece of each of these menu components and get them completed so that they can move on through the course. So once again, using that sort of spatial environment to anchor the learning, so that once the student completes all of these separate pieces, they're going to be able to move on in the course, and they'll have some sort of an anchor for what was covered. So now the student's clicking on pipelines. We zoom into that pipeline section. If you didn't see that, I'll pause it a little bit here. And it's now zoomed in on that component, and we'll go to that lesson, complete this section on pipelines and storage. So that's another way that we're going to leverage that seeing domain and that spatial domain. The next thing that we'll play around with here has to do with seeing the goals and the targets within the learning, that we can get away from this idea of just listing learning objectives. And I'm going to jump ahead here a little bit because the first component here is very fast-moving. It's a video getting people excited about all the things that people do at Graham Construction. But once we're through with that 40-second video, we jump into a piece of the course which is effectively the menu for the course, but it's using color coding to show them what it is that they need to do. So we're not just showing a list of all the learning objectives. We're putting them spatially here in blocks. So they're going to have to complete these, and they'll see a color state change. So once they've completed one of them, like all about Graham, they'll get it nice and red. If it's not completed, it'll be grayed out. And if they click on that piece, then they're going to see, oh, sorry about that. They're going to see what is inside of each of those sections. So the nice thing there, once again, is that it's going to, it's going to launch the training. They're going to see all these elements. They're going to be able to get tested. But in the end, when they're done with each of those pieces, they have this sort of visual space that represents all of the learning objectives, and they get little stars and, gold medallions that show them virtually what it is that they have and haven't completed. So we like to do that. I'm going to jump ahead here to the next one and get into what visual simplifications can really do for us. And this is where we can take highly technical, very detailed and tricky ideas and place them or present them in a way that's very, very simplified so that it's not muddied by a very detailed photo or video. So as I jump into this first one, what we're looking at here is for Transcanada Pipeline, and this was for a pipeline extension project, and they wanted to let the public know, hey, we're going to be putting some more pipeline alongside an existing one. And we know that you as a public are concerned, so we want to give you some information on pipeline integrity. And their original idea was to say, well, let's do a 20-minute e-learning piece or a video and make it available to the public. And we thought, well, that's a cool idea, but the public is not going to have the attention span for such a thing. So let's do it in about 3 or 4 minutes to summarize everything that we want them to know about pipeline integrity. So I know this video is moving quickly, if we hadn't mentioned it before, we are going to make some of these videos available on a Google Drive for those of you who are in attendance. If you want to take a look at these in a way that's a little bit more fluid than over the webinar, we can do that for you. But I'll zoom ahead a little bit here, but what we're doing is we're animating all the main components of pipeline integrity. So we saw aerial patrols, cathodic protection against corrosion, regular maintenance programs, hydrostatic pressure testing, pipeline coating technologies, investigative digs, ground surveys, and it's a very quick animation that gets across all of these points as quickly as we can. Now there's another component that they use, which is a smart pig, and so as it zooms over here, we're going to see this device slowly enter into a pipeline pigging station, and we're going to be able to show individuals, hey, they actually inspect the pipeline from the inside, and I'll pause it here so we can see the pig getting pushed along, and we can see, oh, okay, this is going to go in, and it's going to do some measurement of the pipeline wall integrity with the technology embedded into the pig itself. So this visual simplification for the public helped them understand that there's numerous things going on in pipeline integrity within about 2 minutes as opposed to about 20 or 30 minutes. So a huge time savings there. So we look at a few other ones, and like I said, I'll jump through a few of these because I want them to be as relevant to you guys as possible. This is a fun one. This one happens to be an employee manual for an airline up here based in Calgary, where I am from. And this airline it has a pretty good, lively, vibrant culture of individuals who are owners in the company. And they were, basically handing everybody manuals containing all the policies. And their hope was that they could put this online and make it available to individuals so that A, they wouldn't have to print all the manuals, B, it would be available all the time, and C, they could change it at any given time to update it so that the employees would always have what they need, the most accurate version of the policy. So it was kind of a policy management tool as well. Now, you can see, you might see we've kind of jumped into the section here on dress code, what they can and can't wear when they're on shift or when they're deadheading. And we're also, not only are we going to present simplified versions of this information, but when we turn the page, what you've got here is actually a drag and drop activity that lets you dress yourself with different selections. So you can put the slacks on the individual, you can put the bunny slippers on, you can put the shirt on. In this case, he's putting on a tank top, and we've clicked submit. And the idea is, well, is that an appropriate thing to wear or not? It's saying, no, try again. No, this is not acceptable attire at WestJet, so try again. So this is just a fun way to bring in some light learning into a media tool as opposed to a print document. And by making it interactive, we're visually simplifying some of these policies and making them somewhat fun. Another thing that we'll play around with here in the visual domain has to do with playing around with video to draw individual attention to specific learning components. So I'm going to kind of drag ahead through this video so you can see one of the more important pieces that we're doing. So you might be getting a little blips and images here as we move through. And what we're doing is simplifying how it is that a specific product is to be installed. So this is an exterior finished product, and I'm just going to pause it here at one key spot so that you guys can see it hover. So we're trying to make it easy for the installers as they build this product to do it correctly. Now we could hand them very detailed manuals, we could show them a video, but the video was not quite doing everything for us. The hope was that we could use video to draw attention to where certain key objectives live. So in this case, there's a 3-inch gap that's required from one of the vertical supports to the bottom supports. So we're going to use technology over the top of the video to draw their attention and keep it very simple. And in this case, we're finding that these individuals that take this sort of 5 minutes basic overview training of what's really going on with this product are able to recreate it to a high degree of proficiency because they've been able to see it in a very simplified form so that when they read the instructions, they get it already. It happens very, very quickly. And we think it's all thanks to these sorts of visual simplifications, which is what we're talking about here. In the next category, what we're looking at is creating a certain amount of tangibility to what can be abstract topics. So in the case of this one, what we're looking at is taking the abstract concept of data and information that exists in cyberspace, but giving it a certain amount of volume. So in this example, what's happening here is we're saying, hey, an individual is typing things into a field, just like you guys might be typing in questions into into the webinar here. And what's happening to that physical, or sorry, to those virtual ideas and that text is that they're actually turning into a virtual string of characters. And I'll just zoom out a little bit here, and now that string of characters is taking place in a database. And what we're really getting at here is that later on, that information, those characters are going to be displayed on screen so that everybody else can read them. Well, the magic is that those characters are actually being pulled into the HTML code. So for example, somebody might go ahead and type in text, but they might also type in some code. So we're going to make that code a little bit more tangible here. And we're then going to take that code along with the text. We're going to make it fly back into the database. We're going to say, oh, okay, now that new text and the code are taking place or taking their place inside the database. And now this physical, not physical object, what seemingly is a physical object is now going to be leveraged by the code. So now we're going to take that code that a hacker has placed in and make it to basically hijack the code. So we're explaining how very difficult things like hacking can occur by giving certain elements that are abstract to most of us a certain amount of space. And I do know that it's hard for you to see what's really going on in this somewhat choppy video. But this is a good one for you to understand that when it comes to policies and ideas and values, in especially the safety world and the construction world, your audience needs those to be tangible to a certain extent. They can't just be ideas that are flighty. And so we'll play around with this idea of making things a bit more tangible in order to cement those ideas. Other things that we'll do is this whole idea of new perspectives. So this is similar to visual simplifications, but what we're trying to do is give individuals an opportunity to see things in a way that makes it very, very simple. So in this case here, we're looking down on a plot plan for a new home construction. So we're doing some training on that. And for those of you in construction, you might know these little numbers here represent the elevations on the lot. So this is actually representing a lot that has a certain sway or sort of elevation change to it. And as we play it forward here, we're going to see that we're going to take those elements and those ideas, and we're going to give them a certain amount of shape. So I'll let the video play here, and then I'll pause it as it gets to that point here. And we're able to show that the plan is actually indicating this certain amount of curve to the plot, and we're going to actually place the home in that curved lot. So now it makes more sense to the individuals who are just supposed to, in this lesson, learn how to read a plot plan. And hopefully we've done that for them. So as the house takes its place in the plot plan, you go, oh, okay, it is an elevation. That's why this wall is much higher than the other walls, because the earth comes up to meet it. So those sorts of ideas work very well for us. We're also going to play around with ideas like this, which is, how do joists work? And so, we're going to, I'll jump ahead here to a lesson here on how joist deflection might work to indicate how many joists are we doing. So how do we calculate the number of spans and beams that we'll need? So here's a little piece here on spacing and how much that section of the floor can handle. And what if we needed to bear more? Well, we're probably going to be putting more joists in there. So we'll see things that look like this. So this, once again, is showing students things in a new way. And this one, for example, needed to be very, very simplified because these are not the individuals that are going to do the actual building of the construction, but they are going to be ones who are inspecting the work of the 60 or 70 different trades that come onto a home construction environment. So it needed to be very simplified because they're not experts in any one given trade. So we do like how that works for us. A couple more here in this space because it is so powerful for us. Number one, helping individuals understand the mechanical components of the equipment that they're working with. So you've got operators of heavy equipment and light equipment that may not be that proficient at understanding the mechanisms, and that causes us major problems when it comes to handling that equipment safely and taking good care of the equipment so it lasts long. So in this lesson, we're actually helping individuals who have never driven a car. This is for an audience in Zambia. A number of them have never driven cars before, but they're going to drive and operate $3 or $4 million haul trucks. So we need them to understand how is it that you can take care of this expensive equipment. And number one is by understanding how the mechanical components work together. So that's a big part of what we do, as well as these sort of visual simplifications. And then, of course, to bring back Serious Labs, what they'll be working on is getting individuals to now try to apply the brakes correctly in a given situation. And hopefully that knowledge of how the brake systems in this case worked will help them do it correctly in the sim and therefore in the field. So these visual simplifications work very, very well for us. You know, here's another quick one that we should take a look at as well, and you know, it's another great one for safety. This has to do with rollover of trucks. So it's talking about how the liquid inside trucks can slosh around and cause an accident. So I know this is difficult to see on video, but if I rewind it just a little bit here, you'll see a frame that they're showing the liquid sloshing around and how it leads to rollover situations. So being able to see inside the tanks of the trucks, see things that we can't see in real life, is extremely powerful for us. So I think there's probably enough there in the see it category. I'll move kind of quickly here because I know I can just keep talking. What we're looking for here in the feel it domain are a few things. Now, the number one example, I'll go back to it, has to be that tank example. What we really want to do, or what we wanted to do in that one, once again I'll bring it up over here, is to concern ourselves with getting individuals to feel good or bad about what they see. Now, we need to prime them with what those good and bads are. And where we start in many, many cases is with somebody who represents that good or bad or that feeling. So we use poster children, I call them. In this case, it's WestJet, that airline up here again. This guy is the product oh no, sorry, this is not the airline. This is the Mark's Work Warehouse. This guy's the representative of all their new products and innovations, and they want everybody to feel great about their new product line. So they're creating a certain amount of excitement around all these product innovations. So he comes on screen and he talks a little bit about how exciting this next coming fall is and all the new pieces of equipment that are coming out. And he's now here talking about their boots that plug in, that provide heat throughout the day, and how exciting is that. And that the students here may not know how to feel about it or how exciting an innovation this is unless we demonstrate that to them. This, for the safety world, comes across in establishing that culture and that excitement about the fact that you now work for a company that is doing all it can to make sure that you don't have to sacrifice yourself and your life and your health for your job. And isn't that great that you work for a company like this? That we know that there are underlying values around all safety programs, but we're not often good about relaying those. That when we get into the training, it's more about do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. And while we understand that a lot of your trades are professionals and they do want to be respected and not patronized to be told how to feel about something, we do think that we should represent what that feeling and that sensation is, as opposed to just the facts and the figures and the policies and telling them if you do it, great, if you don't do it, then you're fired. That there's a positive message around some of these safety pieces. So we try to do that by using the representation or the embodiment of what a given program might be. This is another one for that airline where we were talking about how it is that you can represent the attitude of a group or of a company towards a given initiative or product. And here we have Richard Bartram, who's now releasing and announcing the new health benefits program for WestJet. And this is something that they lacked for 2, 3, 4 years, and they finally got it right. And they were revealing the fact that, hey, we've got this new program. And they did it in a fun way, in a brand-relevant way, with their cute characters talking about all the different choices that you might make in a given health and benefits program, whether it's your health spending account or your dental and other needs beyond and above what come in the basic packages. Here's your wellness account and other features. So it's just talking about how you allocate your money in there. But we did it with Richard. Why? Because he was so excited about it and represented sort of this cultural piece to the learning. And we find that very, very helpful. Moving quickly here, we're going to do that with individuals like characters, not just the spokespeople in companies, like the executives talking about excitement and feelings. We're going to create characters that represent the correct or the standardized culture and values pieces. And we're also going to do that with respect to individuals that represent their feelings about a given program. So not just leaders in the company, but anybody. I know we don't have audio coming across here, so I'm not going to play around or show examples here, but I'll put these up and make them available to you guys, is that we're going to use different audio forms to make these programs more engaging and more exciting. We can play around with feelings through sound effects. This was a safety incident that we recreated, and it had lots of loud background noise and thumps and crashes and cracks, and it was quite shocking to hear what this young man goes through in his day-to-day work and ends up with an injury. And the same thing here. This is talking about a product, but very cool, fast-paced music that really gets people thinking, wow, this is a very interesting, cool product, and that music is just pushing the idea. Furthermore, when it comes to feelings, we love stories. And I will pull up a quick example here of a storytelling example. And this is where Paul Hebert is a survivor of a major electrical arc flash discharge. And he goes through and tells his story about how it was that he lost, most of his left hand, all of his right arm, and both of his legs in this incident, and how devastating it was, and how it happened in just a moment. That they were rushing. He goes through and tells us all the different things that led up to the incident, and how it was that simple things like lockout and tagout and specialized PPE probably would have saved him. So this is one of those tricky situations where we're not trying to scare the students with gore and shock value, but we're trying to say, you know what, it really is a certain mindset that we do have to lean back on these rules when we're not certain that something is going correctly. And if we do take that risk, there's major consequences. So that does pull on the heartstrings a little bit, and we do like the idea of telling stories and leveraging those for these situations, especially in the safety world. So all of those are effective and helpful to us. The last domain before we kind of cut out and answer a few questions here has to do with doing it. I'll start off just by saying, you know what, it's really pretty easy for companies like ICOM, and even for you guys that might make things in Captivate or Articulate, or PowerPoint for that matter. It's really easy to develop a direct instruction or lecture-based presentation. It's simple to just say, okay, well, we want to say all this stuff, let's record the audio, and let's animate pretty pictures and movement to that. But we're assuming that the audience is engaged, and we're assuming that they really want to learn this stuff that's coming out to them and being presented. But we know that's not the case. We know that they lose attention in a couple minutes, and we've got to keep them involved, and we've got to keep them doing things to make it work and to make it stick. So not only are we seeing things, not only are we feeling things, we're getting them to actually do it. And this requires a higher degree of programming interactivity into your courses. And I'm not just talking about multiple choice and true false. I'm talking about things like drag and drops and multiple selects and getting students to discover things or to answer a question one given way and have different results come out because of that. And that takes a certain amount of production around the programmatic side. So some of the examples that we have there would be in PowerPoint activities, and I'll kind of zoom ahead here. We've got interactive menus built into our PowerPoints, but I'll jump ahead to this one here. what we've got in some of these activities allows individuals to, in a classroom, try a few things out. So what we've got here is, after a portion of the presentation talks about horn signals in the mine site, it's saying, oh, okay, we've got horn signals during the production cycle. If you hear this horn signal, what would you expect the operator to do? The instructor can, and this is within a PowerPoint, click here to play the horn signal, and they hear it. It's 2 horn honks. And now we ask them to select the answer on the right. Is it this one, or this one? That if I hear 2 horn signals, is it I'm supposed to move forward after being loaded? Is it me backing up from a stop position? Is it me supposed to reposition? I select what is the correct response to that horn signal, and then we're told if we did it correctly or not. And I'll just play it here, and it's telling us, yes, that was the correct selection. It is to back up from a stop position. And what we're doing here is not just telling the students in the PowerPoint what to do. We're giving them a chance to be challenged. And we're also going to integrate that with clicker devices in the classrooms and polling devices, so we can see which students are following along and which ones are not. And so we really do think that this presentation alone is certainly not doing it for us, that we have to get the students involved as much as possible. We're also going to do that with certain pieces of software. So for example, this piece of software that we made allows incident recreation and incident setup for the purposes of asking students, what's going on in the situation. This one happens to be 2 different haul trucks, and I'll back it up a little bit. We're saying, okay, we've got 2 different haul trucks in this situation. One's smaller, one's larger. They're not loaded, but they meet at a 4-way uncontrolled intersection, and we're going to be able to ask them who is supposed to go first. And we can change these arrows. We can change the equipment. We can change the background scene. So as I play it here, we're going to now change the scene to something that's more of a side view. We've still got our trucks here, so now we're going to rearrange those so that they're in the right orientation. And we're now going to say, okay, now we've got a different situation. We've got a haul truck coming down the grade. We've got another one that's getting ready to load up. And in fact, we need to put a shovel up there next to them into a loading situation and talk about, well, what is the right pathway, perhaps, for this haul truck in the distance to pull around here and get loaded up. So we've got multiple environments and pieces of equipment that can be leveraged to create any number of situations and recreate incidents and situations. So what we've been using this one for in the classroom is providing it to students so that they can be the ones that create these incidents and to train others on what these situations might require us to do, or to communicate back to the instructor. In the end, I always define this product here as a whiteboard for people who can't draw very well, because it allows them to just basically draw whatever circumstance and situation with the baseline of equipment and environments. You can pretty much create anything. So that's that's another way of looking at keeping students involved. There's so many things that I can show you guys here, and I know I'm going to run out of time here, but I'll show you 2 more, and then we'll open it up here. This is a piece that I think is really important for the safety world. This is a hazard identification course. It would have been easy for us to present to students all of the different hazard classifications and situations for this trucking company, but in the end, they would have just been passive listening to these things. So what we did is we created scenarios for each of the main categories of hazards. And we said, okay, click on the hazard in the scene. So you really don't learn anything about exhaust fumes in an enclosed space before this, but the students are just supposed to click around. And once they do click on that hazard, it'll say, yeah, you do have that as a hazard. The truck is idling, and it's exposing everyone inside to the garage, inside a closed garage to the exhaust fumes. And now we're going to say, okay, you've identified the hazard. Good job. But now let's do something about that. So we're going to ask them to define, is that a chemical or biological, is it physical, is it mechanical? So they're going to now learn how to classify hazards through these circumstances that they're running into. And yeah, the students gotten it correctly in this frame, saying yes, it was a chemical, biological hazard. And we're going to ask them to do things about it. So should they be stopping the truck? Should they be telling a supervisor about it? Should they be controlling it? And really, any hazard that they see is just basically going to be handled by either A, fixing the situation, stopping the situation, or reporting the situation. But not all of those are always the correct answer. So really, in this course, we've got about 14 different scenarios, and they're learning how to classify and act on those hazards that they discover throughout, as opposed to just being listed all of the hazard types and probably forgetting them. They're actually doing it throughout the course. Last example that I'll bring up here is more of a preparatory example. So this has to do with operating a piece of equipment. Before they go in to a simulator or into the field, we can show them the basic controls of a given piece of equipment. Whether it's a piece of safety equipment or heavy equipment, it doesn't matter. What we're doing here is we're saying, hey, this shovel's moving to the right. It's in propel mode. Which direction should you move the joysticks to make it do that? And so the student then gets a chance to try that out and to place the control sticks in the correct position. And the student's saying it's the left one's forward and the right one's down. And they click submit, and it tells them if they're correct or not. So the beauty of it there is now they're prepared to go into the sim or into the field. This is not new information for them because they've had a chance to do it here. Once again, we didn't tell them what to do. We just had them try it out, and it's that trying that helps them cement the information. Now, I've got numerous other situations and pieces that I can show you, but I think that's probably enough for now. And we can probably take a few questions in the last 10 minutes or so that we have.
Great. I'm just going to leave your screen up just in case we have to go back to something.
Oh,
but,
sure, you bet.
Thank you. That was awesome. That was really enlightening. We do have a couple of questions, and I think Mike may have just sent the same question that I had too. But what kind of data do you have that shows the success rate for learning this way?
You know what? That's a tough one to answer. We have only recently been able to understand more about success rates in correlating simulation to the real-world environment. And the thesis that we're working on right now is, okay, if simulation is a known preparatory stage for the real world, and we know that your productivity numbers go up, your safety incidents go down, your machine care goes way up, if simulation activities are followed correctly and they're correlated to field performance, and performance in the field is correlated there, that's wonderful, and we have numbers to back that up, and we're talking about an 85 to 90% correlation there. The thesis that we're working on now, and the assumption, if you will, is that just placing somebody into a simulation or trying something out is not, it's not necessarily going to help them prepare. So what we're saying is if simulation is good preparation for the field, is e-learning great preparation for simulation? Or is there a better way to prepare someone for simulation? And so, the terrible answer that I have to give you right now is that no, there isn't anything to back that up as far as a consistent number that says simulator performance or field performance will go up this amount. And I would say it's partly because every situation is a little bit different. I would say it's partly because it's difficult in this world to do to work with clients that want to take the time to get sort of pre and post performance numbers. In the oil and gas and construction industries, a majority of our clients, if not all of them, have very specific deadlines. So they're saying, we need to get this program out now, and we need to see this change occur. So we have to do our best in creating a program immediately and getting it available to them. And I think you guys know this in the safety world, is that most of the training...
Hello? Did we lose you? We may have lost our presenter, so if this is the case, we may have to ask some questions post-presentation and then go ahead and send those responses to you. I know I just got one that came through, and we can definitely have Gerald answer those questions and forward those over to you, and I apologize for this. This is the first time this happened to me. So if you have additional questions, let me put my screen up on the board, and we can, let's see, show my screen. Here we go. If you have questions, I'll just put my contact information. It's right here. 480-241-5625 is my number, or kparish@maxcapmedia.com. And if you have additional questions afterward, I'll shoot these over to Gerald and get your questions that you have now answered. And then if we have follow-up, I will make sure that that happens. We've also got some videos that we can send to you all as well. If you'd like that, shoot me over your email address, and I'd be happy to get those to you sometime today. Again, thank you for your time this afternoon. And if you have additional questions, please let us know. Otherwise, we'll see you next month for another safety conference presentation, as well as our risk management webinar series, which we can send you some information on as well. Have a great afternoon. Thank you all.